I remember very vividly the first time I heard the Minneapolis-based indie rock band 12 Rods. I was driving around last year in February with my little brother in Westchester, Connecticut, and he put on the 1998 album Split Personalities. I remember this because it took me like 5 seconds. Those opening guitar chords to the pseudo title and opening track, Split Personality, are so dense, thick, bright, with this like squeezed filter that gives it this futuristic feel. It's a perfect encapsulation of the creativity, weirdness, and overall just like ear candy quality to 12 Rod's pop songwriting. Rock instrumentation, interesting production that makes them one of my favorite bands ever. Also, this Friday they're releasing their first album in 21 fucking years. Let's talk about 12 Rods. So 12 Rods were originally a high school band in Oxford, Ohio. They formed at a Talawanda High School with the lead singer, songwriter, creative force Ryan Olcott, his brother Ev, who I think initially did sound for them and then joined as an instrumentalist, and prominently the drummer Christopher McGuire. They're all in high school, and the band originally has this terrible fucking name, Ryan's Big Head, with an apostrophe Z for the possessive and an H before the G in big and no A in head. I'm really glad they changed it even to the cryptic 12 Rods. Ryan's Big Head released a tape with also like a weird kind of Jerry the Damager spelled like name. That's just a recording of a live show at like a graduation party. Ryan will not give away that tape apparently, if you ask, and it's not on the internet. But 12 Rods, a year after they form as Ryan's Big Head, do release a tape as I think freshly graduated high school band. Impressive. It's this like densely produced, instrumented, kind of like shoegaze, dreamy, almost mathy, energetic with punk energy indie rock album. It's just that it also kind of sounds songwriting and production wise like it is a high school album. But it is bolstered by one absolutely titanic instrumental force, which is the already fully developed drumming of Christopher McGuire. He's like 18, 19 here. That's unbelievable.
Thank you.
Apparently Ryan wouldn't completely disown the, I think, often messy songwriting on Bliss, because I think it has like 3 songs they would revisit on later albums. To me, most prominently, I Am Faster, which was re-recorded for Split Personalities, and Repeat, which ended up being a highlight on their 2000 album, Separation Anxiety. That said, other than the powerful drumming, some of the production choices, and occasionally a flash of songwriting genius or two, Bliss has nothing on the music. From Oxford, Ohio in 1995, and a year later released their debut EP, Gay? First of all, I don't know if you should call that an EP. It's only 6 songs, so it does seem kind of like an EP more than an album, but it's 37 and a half minutes. That's a long EP. Gay, they really came into their own as a band, which I know makes me sound like Patrick Bateman. But there's a whole host of new ideas for how to present, in particular for me, Ryan Olcott's kind of like songwriting, lyrical personality that really work for me. The first 2 songs on Gay are so good. If you ask for my subjective judgment, that their hand was forced in re-recording them for their very next release, Split Personalities. I mean, Red starts with this like noisy intro that eventually gives way to this chugging, almost like punk metal vibe riff that then turns into this like beautiful, dreamy, weave of guitars and high synth pads, and Ryan's usual provocative, kind of uncomfortable lyrics. I mean, he's talking about how like this girl he's addressing or whomever, it's like shouldn't be such a fucking tease, and then Make Out Music has this pace that's way more kind of languorous and nostalgic and yet kind of negative about the past if you read the lyrics, but the sing-song equality to Make Out Music in particular to me is perfectly pitched. The shimmering guitars actually do kind of like reveal their depth with multiple listens, which I know is a tough claim to sustain. But something about those overtones in the descending and ascending riffs on Make Out Music to me is just completely evocative of fucking like the night sky as a teenager or whatever. That's so powerful for me. The rest of the EP sustains the power mostly. It has one song that's not that good called Friend, and the closer is a little neither here nor there for me, even though it's quite pretty as well. But Gay-Mo, the sort of like slow ballad gay cowboy song, indie rock, pure fucking tearjerker, has one of the best guitar solos I've ever heard. Partly because it doesn't really particularly sound like a guitar is playing it. And then Mexico, like Red, has this moment with Christopher McGuire's drumming, which is really fucking like tom roll heavy on this album. Lots of like pitches. It's very melodic drumming. Has this moment, this song Mexico, where suddenly it's as if this like spontaneous decision while recording, or at least it sustains that feeling of like him slamming the snare drum just that little bit harder, just that little bit more emphasis to create a kind of narrative flow, which 12 Rods are great at. Make Out Music, Red, and Mexico, and Game Up, they all feel like stories to me. Like, I can't wait to see where they're going, even though they go, in theory, the same place every time. Pitchfork, which started in Minneapolis. Didn't start in Chicago. Pitchfork was founded in Minneapolis, and they gave Gay their first 10 out of 10 rating ever. Legend has it that the founder of Pitchfork, Ryan Schreiber, and the writer of the review, Jason Josephus, or I don't know how to say it, Jason Josephs, saw the band randomly and liked their performance so much that the next day they bought Gay This is in, 96, 97 or whatever. And, like, the next day he gave it their 10 out of 10 review. That's how fucking, play by ear things were back in the day when Pitchfork was like 5 dudes. Yeah, I really appreciate the mix of what a different user described as like this kind of like weird, this heatish, antisocial bent to the vocals on Gay, which kind of sound like villainous to me, almost as if they're sung by someone that you don't really want to run into in a dark alley or whatever. But, just in terms of the pure kind of like nostalgic hit, this like light emo tinge to the indie rock sounds and the vocals and the lyrics and some of the inflections. Gay feels like a hit of pure torrid youth, almost, I don't know, in the way that like Blonde does or something by Frank Ocean. That was an unconventional analogy for you. But there's something like kind of uncomfortable about the perspective provided, but that brings you back in a really powerful way. Gay is awesome. You should check out Gay. Check it out. Fuck it. After Gay, 12 Rods are picked up by this fledgling label called V2 because Gay is a big radio hit, on college radio in Minneapolis. It's, got the Pitchfork 10 out of 10, even if Pitchfork's opinion doesn't mean that much at the time, maybe. And V2 is run by Richard Branson, the guy who runs Virgin, like one of the big billionaires of the world. V2 released Elephant by the White Stripes. They released Wolfgang Amadeus Phoenix. Deserter songs by Mercury Rev. I mean, especially, Elephant's the album with fucking Seven Nation Army on it. That's crazy. And so they released an album 2 years later, Split Personalities, the first album I heard, 1998. Also a minor hit in the indie rock world, especially locally in Minneapolis. It gets a 9.7, apparently just short of the perfection of Gay, from Pitchfork. I think Ryan Schreiber himself reviews it. Split Personalities is different from Gay. It contains 2 of the songs, as I may have mentioned, from Gay. The first 2 songs, Red and Make Out Music. But they're coming out hot with a lot of new ideas. I'd say there's more of this kind of like upbeat, less depressive, kind of like weird, antisocial bent to the vocals, and much more bright, kind of like upbeat, power pop, certainly influenced songwriting and production style. There's a big kind of like raw, still echo heavy, but raw quality to the production on Gay. That if you listen to, say, Chromatically Declining Me, one of the weirder songs on Split Personalities, you're not going to get raw as a descriptor, I don't think. There's a lot of futuristic, kind of like, heavy filters on the almost every instrument on this album, including the vocals. Check out Chromatically Declining.
Oh, it hit me that how many good people are deceiving me right now. I think about it like that, for choices and bad TV programming. I'm drawn to life like that are to minority. It's something.
So, Split Personalities and Gay stand as the kind of like twin totems of 12 Rod's career. Essentially the first 2 things they released, other than their demo tape or whatever you want to classify it as, when they were like fresh from high school. Split Personalities is tight from front to back. It tries for different things. It has that subversive lyrical edge, which I'll discuss in a second. But definitely, you get the sense, I think, that Ryan Olcott, is reaching for the stars, kind of trying to write the best, most complex, and yet most seamless pop song of all time, every time out. And he often nails it, especially on I Wish You Were a Girl.
'Cause I feel green, if you know what I mean. Don't be so nice to me, 'cause I feel awkward. 'Cause if you were a girl, whoa, nothing would seem to matter. 'Cause if you were a girl,
I Wish You Were a Girl is probably the most famous song by 12 Rods. It contains one of their most unforgettable kind of like lyrical narrative hooks. It has this groovy bass and drums in the chorus that make you kind of want to move. And it's catchy as hell. Part of the appeal of I Wish You Were a Girl that never really goes away from me is that it sustains this feeling of mystery, even insofar as Ryan Olcott's like bearing his soul to this like completely unusual and sometimes like unappealing extent in these songs. I Wish You Were a Girl kind of tells this first person narrative of this character that Ryan Olcott's singing as, who wishes their friend was a girl. This friend, I think, is hitting on them, and either the narrator, this is where the mystery comes in, the kind of like, for me, fundamental ambiguity. You might see it one way, clearly rather than another, is whether maybe Ryan Olcott is this straight man who wishes his gay male friend would stop hitting on him, or rather that his gay male friend would be a girl so that hitting on him could, result in a relationship. Like, he has this weird kind of homosocial relationship with this guy, and he like recognizes that like the guy is, this gay guy is so appealing or nice or like such a good friend that if he only were a girl, the relationship could be like consummated. Or, also probably more likely and conventional, that Ryan Olcott is singing as someone who's attracted to men and wishes that he could suppress his gay desire for social pressure reasons or internal conflict or whatever, thus wishing that the object of his affections were a girl so that it could be like a straight desire thing. And yeah, like, I don't know if like a song like this would do that well these days. I don't know if it's like a fashionable kind of like inquiry, but I love it. I think it's like completely intriguing, opens up after multiple listens. That's just like, I Wish You Were a Girl is a spectacular single, a thought-provoking song, a catchy song. Definitely one of the peaks of 12 Rod's career. Absolutely. Split Personalities as a whole deserves the praise as Gay did. I think I might slightly prefer it on the whole. It's more kind of like pronounced power pop edge, or rather maybe just catchiness on the whole. So after 1998 and Split Personalities comes out, 12 Rods are building in hype. V2, I think after Split Personalities, puts them on this like big hyped up South by Southwest set that apparently goes so terribly that Ryan Olcott, in my opinion, somewhat kind of like conspiratorially seeming, like gives this bizarre interview locally where he's like, I'm not gonna name them, but like this other band fucked up our shit, like they like sabotaged our equipment. This like really weird interview. But nonetheless, things are going well for 12 Rods insofar as, things go well for indie rock bands making this style of music in the mid to late 90s. That V2, which, in theory has all this money behind it, has this insane idea to hire this like, major key producer that I think they have this like weird kind of like audition system for or something. They put out calls, and the first guy to respond is Todd Rundgren. The power pop maven and big fucking record producer Todd Rundgren, who has chops. The first song on side B of his most famous album, Something Anything, which is a double LP where he plays every instrument and produces the whole thing for the first three sides of the album. the track one of side B is like a fucking like nerd, joke about like putting production tricks. It's like spoken word experimental. Like he's like, oh, if you hear like tape wear. So, this guy's like a producer nerd. But he also produced fucking Bad Out of Hell, the album by Meatloaf. That's like one of the best selling albums of all time. I don't know where it ranks. I haven't listened to it. I have no interest in it. But Todd Rundgren is the producer on that album. He produced Skylarking from 1986 by XTC. Which for me is one of the most spectacular, forward-thinking production jobs anyone's ever done. The drums, the extremely loud drums and snare sound on that album to me are iconic. The synth sounds, I love the production on Skylarking and the job Todd Rundgren does. But apparently it was a terrible experience because V2 flied 12 Rods out to Hawaii for 6 weeks to record the follow-up to Split Personalities. Came out in 2000, an album called Separation Anxieties. And apparently it goes terribly. Todd Rundgren, if you believe the account of the bands, both Ev and Ryan Olcott have all these absolutely hilarious quotations about the job Todd Rundgren did while producing Separation Anxieties. Where it's like, he drank cans of Foster's all day and just pressed record. He was always the first to, leave and the last to enter. And, he's like rude and standoffish and like pretentious. And, it's like in Hawaii, it's this like complete fucking like parody of disaster. I mean, that's what like Kanye West did for My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, right? Why was 12 Rods in Hawaii? And the album's, by the band's account, a disaster. Ryan and Ev have talked over and over about how Todd Rundgren fucked everything up for that album, and some of the songs were good, and some of the songs, could have had potential, but that, like, the album was a mess, that they'd re-record it before they ever reissue it. And Pitchfork, after giving Separation Anxieties a 9.7 and Gay a perfect 10, slams the album with a fucking 2 out of 10. Yikes. Separation Anxieties is not that bad. The production is not as distinctive, kind of like powerful, synthetic, like filter heavy as Split Personalities, nor does it have the rawness of Gay. But Kaboom, the opener, kind of like demonstrates some of the virtues of what Todd did. The ethery, kind of airy synth sound, the kind of glow to the album, that like the warmth of the synths, and the kind of tamped down dynamic range presents. And there are a few very good songs on Separation Anxieties, including the song that appeared on their first album, Bliss. The song called Repeat is a great song. I think it benefits a lot from that production sound.
You sing me alright, then I'll be just fine. Give me time, just give me some wine. If you sing me alright, then I'll be just fine. Girl, I like what you wear. Hurt me 'cause I don't care. Fine, I'm down.
But as with Friend on the Gay EP, which is easily the low light of that album, and to some extent something like maybe Part of Two from Split Personalities, Separation Anxieties has a few boring songs, more than the other albums, any of the other albums, including the one that came after Separation Anxieties. It's unfortunate. The last song on it also sucks. Like it's like one of the worst 12 Rod songs. I think it's a strong album, but by all accounts, nobody was happy with that thing. Nobody. And it really kind of ruined Ryan Olcott's viewpoint on the music industry, on fucking like what he could get out of it, what the relationship between his art that he wanted to make and what he could do with his life based on that art. Apparently this was like an extremely disillusioning experience for Ryan that he talks about all the time. And then 2 years later, because one thing I forgot to mention is Christopher McGuire, the guy I was praising the shit out of as a teenage drummer, quits in the middle of the recording of Separation Anxieties. I don't know if he like flew back from Hawaii in the middle, but and you know the different drummers fill in. It's not all. There's a lot of McGuire on that album, but it's not all McGuire. And Ryan Olcott replaces him with Dave King, who has almost like this simpler, less floor tom, or tom melodic, heavy, kind of like hit all the drums style. A little more like, I don't know, Janet Weiss from Slater Kinney or something. Like a little more just like boom pap, and whatever that means. And they released their final album, 2002's Lost Time, and then break up 2 years later in 2004. They played one reunion show in 2015, and then obviously in 2023 they announced their new album, the first in 21 years. But we should talk about Lost Time, because Lost Time is a fascinating document. I reviewed it previously and talked about how, for me subjectively, Lost Time seems like a kind of prophetic album. Well, something I love to talk about is that in a recent interview, 12 Rods, Ryan Olcott talked about how people on the internet have approached him and told him that Lost Time is like the first furry album because it has, whatever, dog wolf head on the cover. And weirdly enough, that kind of like dovetails with my point about it, which is that it does feel like it appeals to certain strains of internet culture, music taste in the modern era among young people, in a really powerful way. Lost Time is like one of the loudest albums ever. I mentioned Slater, this is like The Woods or whatever. Like this shit slaps you in the fucking face. I mean, just listen to Accidents with
When the minds turn off, when we're turned on. If I waste my time reaching backward, I go. Accidents waiting to happen, but we're both smarter.
24 hours ago, all of those songs are 11 out of 10. They also kind of present yet another new genre production motif spin on 12 Rod sound. The power pop is certainly there, the big choruses, the bright chords, the upbeat kind of like tempo, but definitely more like almost like emo touches, or the snarl to his voice. The shoegaze elements are there, and definitely an increased kind of post-hardcore influence in the kind of like thrash of the music's dynamics. Lost Time is a great album. It again, like Separation Anxieties, having a weak final track. The last three on Lost Time don't do much for me. Telephone Holiday is thankfully now no longer the last song in their discography, but that's a song they really wrote during the Separation Anxieties sessions, and apparently Todd Rundgren was unhappy with the song and told them to leave it on the fucking cutting floor, and they got mad about that too. But he was right; that song sucks. Like, it's not that good. The chorus is weird, kind of like amelodic, descending, fucking nothing to me. The lyrics are on the wrong side of creepy. He talks about odd stuff that like is hard to put this like filter of irony over to make it acceptable. But Lost Time otherwise is as good a fucking comeback, or whatever, critical comeback. It only took 2 years after Separation Anxieties come out, as you could hope for. And it's a band looking forward, first and foremost. They're trying to appeal to a modern audience, but in a way that completely feels like an organic outgrowth of the motifs, sounds, and kind of like moods they were exploring early in their career. And as with some of separation anxieties and a lot of split personalities in particular, it has that fucking like, hydra, like, sprouting creativity, brightness and edge to it, where there are multiple moments on both split personalities especially, and Lost Time, where I am blown away, or like I feel ecstatic. I feel like I'm listening to a songwriting genius at work, and that hit of pure kind of like creative energy to me is at the core of 12 Rod's practice. It's why they're one of my favorite bands of all time, for sure. I think they're underrated. And I love that they synthesize that kind of like, wow, for me, listening to Animal Collective, Merriweather, The Post Pavilion, that kind of feeling. Whatever band, elicits that like positive sense of like, just like something beautiful being thrown out into the air, flung without abandon. I love that they're able to do that and still feel like they're kind of pressing buttons. They're, especially through his lyrics, which are always looking to worm their way into some uncomfortable spot in your mind. That's badass to me. But Ryan evidently is not happy with the direction his band took. The guy is, troubled with regard to his perspective on his past music. He's talked about how rough it was being put through the ringer in the music industry, how music, because he had that taste of success and yet kind of couldn't follow through in a full-bodied way, kind of like derailed his life for a while, because in theory, if he hadn't been at all successful, he could have focused on something else, whatever, and quit his day job. So Ryan has had a tortured relationship, to be frank, like that's the word for it, with his time in 12 Rods. And yet, a few months ago, he announced a new album. The first in 21 years. 3 songs already have been released from this album. It's only 7 songs long. It's less than half an hour, which is kind of disappointing. And to be frank, there's a trace of disappointment in some of the music that's come out thus far. I actually like the songs, but there's some obvious things you can point to. The first single, This Is Gonna Be My Year, I don't think is like particularly thrilling, but it has this nice solid beat. The production is good. Good production decisions everywhere. These like, kind of like twinkly synths in the chorus. It's hi-fi. It's a very, solid song. And then the second song was lo-fi for some reason, which kind of gives this feeling that he's trawling through, the archives. No problem with that, but it's kind of weird to give a song that sounds like Clarion Clear, followed up with 2 songs that sound kind of like shit. And Private Spy is the second song. Almost reaches higher heights than This Is Gonna Be My Year, and has a lot of indelible melodies, but doesn't come together. There's like almost too much going on. And the kind of like weird sense of like disconnected linkages or whatever, like paradoxical, weird hairpin turns in the structure of songs that are nonetheless like really tightly interlocked somehow through transitions. The latter half of that is missing in Private Spies. It kind of sounds like a mess. And then the third single is my least favorite, Twice. Also lo-fi, and kind of just feels like a mush of like 4 quite pretty jazzy, guitar chords and some nostalgic romantic lyrics. But fuck it, like I'm excited for the album. Ryan Olcott's one of the best pop and rock songwriters of all time, and he even proves that with some of the material that's been released for If We Stayed Alive. I love that he comes out firing. After the relatively tame This Is Gonna Be My Year, with his like second song first in 21 years or whatever, and he's already saying shit like play your little nympho games, which is like a fucking weird thing to say, like to this, interlocutor or whatever subject of the song. But it's badass. I don't know. He's trying to do weird things. He's trying to make us uncomfortable and yet like eminently satisfied at the same time. I don't know if this video does much for people in terms of revealing information about the band. But I hope you listen to them. I hope you like some of the songs I sampled. And just check out fucking 12 Rods. They rock. The album comes out July 7th, this Friday, if we stayed alive. And that's it, baby.
Just can't help but to play with your emotions.